Fáilte, Cardia Gale. How are you getting on? What an absolutely mad time to be alive in the world today. I hope you are all well. This is episode 62 of the Rebel Matters podcast, and the guest today is Maysa Daw, who is a member of the Palestinian hip-hop group DAM. They started in the late 1990s. Tamer and Suhail Nafar started it with their friend Mahmoud Jerry, and then Maysa's been singing with them and performing with them since 2015. DAM have changed the Palestinian hip-hop scene forever, because they rap about issues that other people weren't rapping about before they started, political issues and social issues and dogmas and taboos and other things that weren't being rapped about in Palestinian hip-hop before that. The first time I actually came across them was a couple of years ago when I was over in Palestine and we watched a documentary called Slingshots Hip Hop, and it was mad because I was sitting there looking at it, and it was kind of like a documentary of the early days of the Palestinian hip-hop movement. And at that time, kneecap had just started to take off, and it was mad how many similarities there were between where the artists had come from and what the artists wanted to rap about, and also the sort of attitude of like just not giving a fuck about what anybody thinks about what they're doing, as long as they felt that they were doing something right and it was true to themselves, and it was sort of honest, and also that it was kind of real and coming from the heart. And that's something that we talked about on the podcast as well. So this episode has definitely got a bit of homework with it. I want you to go and listen to the new DAM album, Ben Hana Wa Mana, and also go and check out Maysa's album, Between City Walls. They're both on Spotify. And I would also just recommend going and sticking Maysa and DAM into Google and YouTube and learning a bit more about where they're after coming from and the kind of art that they make. And if you can track down that Slingshots Hip Hop documentary, I would really highly recommend watching that as well. The chat with Maysa was recorded in a café in Ramallah, and it's myself, Maysa, and my bestie Alex Sampson, who I was over in Palestine with, of course, getting ACLAÍ Palestine set up in the Aida refugee camp with Sally, Potter, Vicky and Kate as well. Because it was recorded in a cafe, there's a good bit of background noise going on with the music, and you'll actually hear that one of DAM's tracks came on the speakers in the shop as well at one point during the podcast. But just stick it out because it's worth listening to this episode all the way through to the end, and the background noise does get a little bit less as we move through the episode. But see, just before we get stuck into the chats with Maysa, I just want to take a pause out of the podcast episode right now to send all of the love and solidarity to our brothers and sisters over in Palestine. They're going through all the same stuff that we're going through at the minute with the coronavirus and the shutdown and all the restrictions that have come with that. And on top of that, are dealing with the ongoing Israeli occupation, which makes dealing with this kind of a pandemic a whole other thing, because it adds just so many other layers onto it. So I just want to send all the gra over to the lads in Palestine and let us know that we're thinking about you, and that and personally I'm looking forward to the day where the restrictions are lifted and going back over there to catch up with all the mates over there and get the ACLAÍ Palestine project up to the next level. So keep her lit, lads. We're with you, and the no user with us as well. We're actually in regular contact with the crew in the Laji Centre and the coaching team who are over in ACLAÍ Palestine as well, just every few days just to check in to see how things are going. There's not an awful lot that can be done in terms of training people in the gym itself, but we're still pushing forward with putting the structures in place, just and like communicating with each other remotely and working with the coaches over there through Skype and stuff, just to help them get sort of like upskilled in the training systems that we're putting in place as part of their project over there. So keep her lit, lads. As I mentioned in the last episode with Lewis Kenny, which was episode 61, I'm doing my very best to get 2 episodes every week out. The first one on Tuesday and the second one on Friday. This one's coming out on Friday, so the next one's going to be on Tuesday. And I've got loads of good interviews lined up and a good few recorded already. And I have some extra time, of course, now to be working on the podcast because of the fact that ACLAÍ is closed down for the foreseeable future. And in the meantime, I've got a Patreon page set up for this podcast. It's patreon.com/Rebel Matters. If you want to become a supporter of the podcast, then you'll get early access to the episodes and some exclusive content, and get to contribute to the direction of the podcast as well, just through the chats and stuff that we're going to be having in the discussion room on Patreon. And you'll also be helping to support the ongoing production and creation of this podcast, which I am really excited to be actually getting stuck into in the coming weeks and months because of the fact that ACLAÍ is closed down for the foreseeable future. And this is kind of like the main project that I've decided to get stuck into while we're in this sort of like self-quarantine situation. So if you do want to become a patron of the show, then go to patreon.com/Rebel Matters and you can see what the crack is there. Of course, the show is free on all platforms anyway, and it's always going to be free. If you're not in a position to support the podcast through Patreon right now, then I would really appreciate it if you left the podcast a review on iTunes and shared it on your social media, and just keep talking about it to your mates. Like, the feedback for the podcast has been unreal in the last week or two, ever since we've kind of relaunched it into this 2-week format, and since I've had more time to dedicate to making the shows and getting them all out there. So thank you so much for everyone who's been sharing the show on social media, everyone who's left a review, and a massive shout out to everyone who has already become a patron of the show. Right now, I can't tell you how much that support means to me personally, and how much it's helping to keep the Rebel Matters on the road, and how much it's helping me to maintain my sanity while I am sort of self-quarantined here up at the house and not really going out that much until this thing passes by, and hopefully we all come out the other side of it in one piece. And lads, one last thing before we do get stuck into the chat, and this is the last thing, I promise, because I know I've said that a couple of times so far. I've just been getting out of the house once a day, really, just to go and get some essentials from the shop, and I think that that's kind of a wise way to play this out for everyone. But there was 3 nights in a row there when I went out. I was going over to the shops and then going into ACLAÍ to pick a couple of things up. The first night I was going out there was a fella who was sitting on the edge of the wall with his feet dangling over the wall by the river in the city here. And sometimes I do that myself, and I just sit there to chill out, and sometimes maybe have a wee bottle of beer or something like that and just sit and chill for half an hour or an hour, listen to a podcast or read a book for a while. But there was something about the way that this fella looked at me when I cycled past him that made me want to go and check up on him. So I jumped off my bike and went over to have a chat with him, and just as I was going over to him, he went to stand up, and lads, he was so drunk he nearly fell into the river backwards. And he was fortunate that he managed to get himself away from the very edge of the wall, and then I helped him across the road and he went on his way. The second night I was going in, there was another young man lying out cold on the footpath in the city centre, so we had to call an ambulance for him as well and wait for the ambulance to come, and he was okay in the end. And then the third night, 3 nights in a row, there was another young man lying face down with blood pumping out of his head, and he was lying on the ground, pretty much out cold and covered in blood. And when I went over to see how he was doing, I actually thought he was dead when I went over to him first and gave him a bit of a shake and a bit of a shout, and he started to come around again. And when he came around, he was so drunk he didn't even know that there was anything wrong with him, and we obviously had to call an ambulance, and he was okay in the end. But I just think it's worth taking a second just to realise that during this time, whenever our resources are being so stretched in just about every aspect, from the usual services that homeless people will get, and the people who are vulnerable in society, the services that they are normally able to avail of are being stretched, and everything else is just being stretched to the limit. And of course, there's a lot of stress and anxiety and fear out there about how this is going to play out, and about keeping ourselves and our families and our friends safe. But I just want to say that right now is the time whenever we're going to have to look out for the people who are most vulnerable in society as well. And the people who are usually vulnerable are going to be in an even more vulnerable position now, as we're going through this, where there's less people out and about on the street to maybe help out with people who do find themselves in a difficult situation, whether that be that they're sleeping rough, or that they're having a rough time, or that they're drunk, or that they're just intoxicated in one shape or form. And I know that we're kind of limited in terms of what we can do with the social distancing that's required from all of us to make sure that we can try and stem the passing on of the virus from one person to the next. But just look out for each other as much as you can, and help out whenever it's safe to do so, and just make sure that we're all looking out for one another until this passes, and then also, of course, after it passes as well. Right, Gael, let's get stuck into episode 62 here, which is Maysa, myself and Alex Sampson in a cafe in Ramallah. And as usual, at the very end of the episode, after the outro music, there is a bit of me reading Roald Dahl's book, Boy Tales of Childhood. So if you want a bit of a soothing bedtime story, or to hear a wee piece of that book, then just hang tight after the outro music and it'll come on by itself. And if you want to go back to the very start of that book, then you can go back to episode 51, which is the episode that I started reading that book. Okay, let's get stuck into it.
Cool. Okay, let's go for it.
Okay, well, thanks a million for looking at us and stuff like that. Thank you.
No worries.
So we actually listened to your album this morning and before we left.
Cool. The Dam's album? Dam's album or my album?
Your album.
My album. Cool.
Yeah. So it's between
City Walls.
City Walls. Yeah, it's class. So well done.
Thank you.
I guess the reason why we were so interested in getting to meet you was to find out a little bit about the hip hop scene in Palestine, and even just the
general music scene and how it all kind of works here.
Yeah, and maybe a good place to start. Maybe how did you end up getting into it?
Into music. Well, I actually kind of always knew that I wanted to do music. I always knew that I want to sing and that I want to perform and that I want to do shows, ever since I can remember myself. And I used to sing a lot when I was a kid. I used to just, perform in front of everybody all the time whenever possible. And then I started, taking it more seriously. I started doing courses when I was young as well. Started studying vocal lessons. But I really got into the scene itself in, I would say, 2010, 2011. That I got into this specific scene and started getting better. I then started performing with Ministry of Dabki. Do you know them? So Ministry of Dabki is two guys, Wala Isbet and Bruno Cruz. Wala Isbet is also a part of 47 Soul, if you know them. Mm-hmm. And I started singing with them. I was performing with them. We released 2 songs together. And I started getting more and more into that. Meanwhile, studying music and doing my own music, my own songs. And then I just got a call from them. They just released their album and they were looking for someone to be able to sing with them on stage. And that was it then, just as a guest performer. And we did that for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then Tamer says, well, yeah, okay, but it's stupid to write, Dam and Maysa, and we're working on some stuff together, so do you want to join the band? And I'm like, fuck it. And then and so we did that, and that's how it happened. Never really, like, I would say that all the big things that happened with me career-wise were never planned. It's just happened.
Yeah, serendipity.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
By the way, can I curse or not?
Oh,
really?
yeah.
Okay,
That's
cool.
all right.
As much as you want.
Cool.
Free medium.
Okay.
Person is like the least bad thing that has happened on the podcast.
Okay, cool.
Just words.
You know, I think like the one that I did with Kneecap, my brother, and the other guy Nisha and Moog. So I recorded it. So I live in Cork, but we're up from Belfast. So Belfast is in the north and Cork is in the south. But when they come, anytime they come to Cork, like my house, like turns into like a crack den or something. There's like so many people sleeping around. There's just like everyone is.
The whole crew
just
lands
like
on
partying
Okay.
like
That's good fun.
I never recorded a podcast where like I was drunk or stoned or anything. So I was like, the three of us were going to do a podcast, so we just smoked some weed and did the podcast. And like, as I was saying, like normally I don't edit the podcast. But that one,
Yeah.
it took us
A bit more work.
We couldn't speak. It took us like, so we were like this. The podcast went like this. So what was I going to say? Fuck. Remember the time?
4 hours long.
Anyway, so you can say whatever you want.
That's so true.
That's what I'm saying.
Good to know.
Sweet. Well, actually, so the reason that when I kind of started thinking about this was 2 years ago when I came here first and watched. You've seen Slingshot's hip hop?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I watched that. It was at the same time when Kneecap were getting off the ground. And I was just sitting there watching. I was like, what the fuck? I was like, this is nearly exactly the same as. I know it's not exactly the same, but there were some similarities with where they came from and the like political and kind of environment that was going on around them. To even just, I don't know, just seem like similar kind of like attitudes towards music and art and stuff like that there. So that's how we ended up kind of doing this. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. Like,
What do you want to know?
so let's see. So like where are you based in Palestine?
I'm based in Haifa.
Yeah, is that where you were originally from?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Haifa. I moved from there to Jaffa for about 6 years, and then I just ran away from Jaffa and went back straight to Haifa. Yeah.
What's next? So we haven't been there. So
And to Jaffa or Haifa? Neither. Oh, you have to. You have to. I mean, Jaffa is beautiful. I love Jaffa. It's so beautiful, but it's like one of the most intense, hardcore places to be in. It's a hard place to be in because it's very normalized. It became very Israeli. You know, you go to the old village, the old city in Jaffa, which is all like Palestinian old homes, and it's all like done into like boutique galleries and all of that kind of bullshit. It's not bullshit, but I say bullshit because I'm pissed about that specific place, and the Israeli flags everywhere, and it's just and it's Arabs there are more like a trend than like it's becoming something very cool to know Arabs. So if you're there, you're like some sort of an attraction, especially if you don't look Arab, because people don't think I look like an Arab. So for them, it's like, whoa, what the hell is this thing? But it was really hard for me, and it's very expensive there, and I couldn't find people, and the Arabic culture was dying bit by bit, and I felt so suffocated in the place, and I just had to go back to Haifa. And Haifa is very chill, and I'm a very chill person. I'm not a city person. I just want to chill,
Is Haifa more like a small villagey town?
Haifa is bigger than Jaffa, a lot bigger than Jaffa. But it's very chill, and it's sort of like you have everything there. Like you have the beach, you have the mountains, you can go to the mountains and see the beach, you have the city, you have the downtown where there's a lot of bars and dance bars and all of that, and at the same time you can walk like 2 minutes and find the chillest place possible. It has a lot of trees, a lot of grass, a lot of this and that. Jaffa is just like this tiny place where it's becoming more and more like Tel Aviv. They're like connected, it's the same municipality, but there's like a small part that is still called Jaffa, which was once a lot bigger. And there it's just, noise and a lot of cars and a lot of rushing and a lot of running and I just couldn't take it.
Not for you.
Yeah.
We've been talking about our trip here so far, and it's been a pretty intense schedule. So today we were in Ramallah. Yesterday we were in Nablus. We were in the Ladder refugee camp. The day before that we were mostly in Aida at the camp, setting up the gym, and then even going to Jerusalem today. It's like every day is like a completely different.
Yeah, it's very different. Yeah. Every little place is different. Like every neighborhood in the same city is different. Like in Haifa, also in Ramallah, you go to this neighborhood up here and it's something, and then you go to Masyoun and it's like a totally different.
Same in Bethlehem as well. You feel as well.
Same in Bethlehem. Same in everywhere.
Tomorrow we're going to Hebron. It's completely another.
Hebron. Did you go there before?
I've been there.
You've been there. Okay.
I've never been.
You've never been.
Yeah.
Be mentally prepared.
I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yesterday was quite a shock just going to Balada and hearing people's stories there and just witnessing the overcrowding and obviously we witnessed overcrowding in Aida, but it just felt like a different.
Hebron is like some new level shit.
And then again, everyone's warning us about Hebron and just being kind of prepared for what we're gonna experience there. But
are you gonna go? Do you know a little bit around there and Tel Remiuda neighborhood and all of that? You go in with someone.
Going with someone, actually, a guy who brought us around the last time. It was
perfect.
So for different reasons, but Hebron was like one of the most intense place probably I think that I've been to in Palestine. Walk down Al Sharada Street and stuff like that is mental. But then even for me, going to Jerusalem is also mental for different reasons, because when you're in Bethlehem, you're in the middle, it's kind of the occupation is around the outside in a way, whereas when you're in Jerusalem, everything's kind of
it's connected.
It's like a more tense environment that can change.
For me, it's like I just go into Jerusalem and I'm like, just without talking to people, without doing anything, I just enter and it's like suddenly something so heavy comes down on me.
Even just the 15 minutes we just spent in it, even that you could feel that
so intense.
Compared to Bethlehem or other places, there's not that kind of community happiness thing where people are talking and smiling. It's a bit more kind of tense and people aren't really. They're kind of a bit more head down
in Jerusalem,
straightforward. It's
because also that place that you went to, it's one of the most problematic places. All of that. It's the old city, the center where mostly Arabs are there, but a lot of times there's soldiers and there's Jewish Jewish settlers and there's always something going on. So people mentally, when they go out, they're like, okay, I have this thing to do, let's do it and finish and
don't deviate.
So I know, I think in my head, when I just hear you talking about Haifa, I think that's another arm of what's happening around here that we haven't experienced yet, because it just seems like a completely different world.
It's a very different reality. It's like going to a totally different place. It's it's just different. It's so weird. Actually, this was, for me personally, mentally, a very big problem. And it was something that I always felt not ashamed of, but I'm come from Haifa, the city. I'm a city girl. I was kind of privileged. I'm the most privileged that could be if you look at the big pictures here of Palestinians and how they do and what they do. And then I went into the group that sings about poverty and the ghettos and lead and all the gun violence and the police violence and all of that, and I went into that and I'm like, okay, what is this? I didn't even know about politics until I was 13, 14. I had no idea what is going on politically, because you don't feel that in Haifa. You don't see soldiers. You don't you might see soldiers, but it's not. There's no confrontation. There's nothing really intense going on, And for me, it was coming here and then performing in Ramallah or talking about Palestine while I'm coming from Haifa. Who the fuck am I to talk about the West Bank when I come to from Haifa and I've never really like lived that kind of reality, and it was a really big barrier for me until a certain point. I also, like, I'm Palestinian, but I hold the Israeli ID because I was born inside of what is called, the Israeli borders, and so I have this ID, and I would never before, until like a few years ago, I would never say to anybody that I have an Israeli ID. I was so ashamed of that, I was so ashamed of that, until I step by step started saying, like, okay, but this is our reality, and it's so complex because the reality of people in Jerusalem is very different from people in Bethlehem and Ramallah, and it's super different than life in Haifa and people from Haifa, and it's so complex. Even the neighborhoods in Haifa, each neighborhood has a totally different story, each neighborhood in Jaffa has a totally different story, and it's just like that. And it was like a huge block for me until a certain point, till I started talking more about it.
So what happens that you were able to get past it?
DAM happened. DAM changed my life. Joining DAM definitely changed my life. Because, Mahmoud and Tamer, Mahmoud and Tamer are very different people. We're very close, we're really good friends, but we're very different people. And for me it was interesting because, especially working on the album, on our latest album, Ben Hana wa Mana, every subject that we wanted to talk about, we dug really, really, really deep. And each subject, and we talk a lot about social issues, and each subject we talked about, you would dig into the subject from 3 different point of views, 3 totally different points of view. The view of Maysa coming from Haifa, the city girls, of Mahmoud, and that has his own mentality, and then Tamer that has his own mentality, and we would just dig in, and really that process changed my life on so many levels. But it started even before that. I can say that it started changing. It's funny, that's our song, actually. Yeah.
On purpose, you think you would?
Probably. Yeah. So anyway, at the point that this thing started changing about, talking about where I come from and that I hold the ID and not be ashamed of it, was when Junction 48 movie went out. It was released. The Junction 48. Okay, so it was a movie that was written by Tamer, one of DAM's founders. And it was actually the first ever movie made that really talks about Palestinians living inside of the Israeli borders, and talking about, because whenever you would talk about the Palestinian struggle, you would talk about Gaza, you would talk about the West Bank, you would talk, which is like, you would always put the wall inside, you would always put the soldiers and which is very understandable, but at the same point that left me personally in a place like, okay, if I want to talk about Palestine, I need to be in those places living that reality. And then suddenly Junction 48 comes, and then suddenly I see on the screen that, okay, it's interesting, like, we started being portrayed in a way, and for me, I didn't even realize, I was never thinking about it, that I had this kind of block, and then this movie went out, and I started talking a lot about it with Tamer, and Tamer and Mahmoud, they've been performing and singing for like 20 years, and they went through mostly everything that I'm going through now, the questions that I'm asking, all these things, like, how do I do this, how do I do that? And it was interesting because we would dig into deep conversations, and that would just, open my mind up for like, yeah, but why am I blocking? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? And I think like one of the main things that I realized is when working on the album on Ben Hana Mana was that all these years I was treating myself as a victim, and I just realized that, and I said, okay, like this, it changes here, like I'm not, because when we talk about, usually when we go, mostly when we go to the West, to Europe, to the US, to whatever, we're usually asked 80% 80% of the questions when we have interviews, we're asked about politics, and we're not asked about music. And the funny thing is, like when I say asked about politics, it's like seriously politics. Like, what do you think about the Assad regime, or what do you think about Bibi Netanyahu doing this and that? And that's not what I do. I don't even watch this thing. I'm not there. I hate politics. I'm not political, but my life is very political. So if someone would ask me about a song, I would start talking about politics, because it was driven out of something political that happened, and that would explain a lot of things. And it was a struggle of, why are we always just talked about politics? Are we just, a geographical talent? Are we only touring the world because we're Palestinians? And a huge part of it is, yes, of course, definitely. We've been touring a lot, and a lot of those times was because we're Palestinians. And then I realized that the main thing that is causing this is because I'm portraying myself as a victim. It's because I'm not allowing myself to talk anything personal. It's because that whenever I used to write a love songs, I would say, oh, what the fuck is this bullshit? I can't write a love song, like people are being killed, so I have to write about that. And I never found the balance. I would just go out of myself, and instead of talking about my reality, I would talk about whatever people are expecting to hear about Palestine, about this, about that. And that was a huge breaking point for me to realize that.
Do you think that your career in a way changed after that point?
Yeah. I wouldn't say my career changed, because we just released the album, but I definitely would say at this point my writing changed, my attitude changed. Like mentally, it's just, and I'm still working through a lot of things, but it's like mentally, I'm like, okay, like, I don't know how to exactly explain it, but like...
Do you feel like as an artist you're more kind of defined now, and like you're working within the parameters of what you actually want, as opposed to like what you feel like you should be doing?
I don't know. Interesting question. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know, because...
Getting closer to that, at least.
Yeah, getting closer to that.
When I think about, we were just talking about a little bit about Kneecap before we started recording, and the way that they've gone from like that gig we went to in a couple of years ago, there was like 150 people at it. Now
it was like seeing Rage Against the Machine,
but then we were
in
just
a dirty club. It was amazing. I was like in tears.
Something's happening.
I was absolutely
you could feel it. Like it was just, you could feel it.
Yeah,
and then
it's so special.
Anytime I think about like why that's happening, like why it's still going on, the only thing that comes back to is the fact that like what they're doing is like completely real. They're not like trying to do something. They're not trying to be someone else. Or they're not like pretending like they're like from.
They're not just imitating stuff they've seen on TV.
Somewhere,
yeah.
So that people think that it's cool. It's actually just that it's really real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so real.
That was the first thing that hit me about them, was just it was so real. It was like you could just tell they were just telling you their life. But they weren't like, I've seen this, like I think that's probably how people in the scene act, or like, that's how the lads grew up in, America or whatever, It was like 100% no bullshit. And it's so punk as well, though, like Kneecap. There's such a punk ethic to it, where it's just like they're doing it their own way, It's like the crew around them is like all their mates, and like there's no one like, there's no bullshit with them at all.
Yeah,
it's
like,
great.
there's no filter, and I guess that's
no filter whatsoever.
Anything in life, like if you see something that where someone is just like being real, then it connects.
Strikes a chord.
People connect with it. And like I think when I think about the people who like the followers they have now, like it's a lot of people who directly relate to them, and a lot of people who would kind of like to be able to relate more.
It's amazing because it feels like they kind of like just turned the key and opened a door in Ireland that was just like had a load of people banging on the other side of it, and just they didn't have the key. Because all the like, I don't want to like slander Irish rappers because there are some really good ones, but it just felt like up until that point it was like an imitation game. It was like how can we be like the American scene or the English scene or something like that? And it wasn't like this is us. It's like this is.
It's really hard.
Obviously, it's
very
extremely hard
to do something, because when you enter that you don't, it's so hard to distinguish between what is really you and what is not really you. And you know, for me, because it was like I started singing before I knew anything about politics. I knew I wanted to sing, and for me it's so weird that I started as plainly a singer, you know, musician, no ideologies, nothing, no politics, no this, and I reached a point where I couldn't talk about anything other than politics and social issues. I disconnected, and and for me it wasn't like, it didn't feel that I was trying to talk about something that I am not. It felt that no, of course I need to talk about these things. And it's really hard because, you know, all your life, all our life we're told be yourself, right? But we're put in the classroom with the same people, dressed the same uniform, told you cannot go to the bathroom without raising your hand, you cannot eat until we tell you that this is the time that you can eat, you cannot draw this because this is not acceptable, you cannot put your head like this, you have to, and then at the same time they would tell you be yourself, be yourself, be yourself, and then you realize at some point, like, what the fuck it is, and what does it mean, be yourself? Like, we're told be yourself all the time, but no one tells you how to be that. Instead they try to put you in the same box as everybody else, and then you go into that and you see the people around you talking about these things, they're like, yeah, I'm interested in that, that's what I am, that's who I am, and then years pass and you realize, oh, that's really not who I am, but I have no idea because I don't know how to do it. And especially when you're a musician or an artist of any sort and you want to get your word out, being yourself is not always what comes to mind, you know, because a lot of times you'll be thinking of, okay, this is what people expect to be hearing, and not of a place because I just want to be heard, but of a place that I really believe that this is the only thing that I need to talk about, because this is what we should be talking about as Palestinians, because I'm a Palestinian and that's all I am, period, you know. And then you realize that, okay, but I'm not a Palestinian, period. I am a Palestinian, but I'm a human, I'm a woman, I'm a singer, I'm a musician, I'm Palestinian. And then you realize that, okay, but I can talk about a lot of other things, and I still talk about politics a lot, and I still talk about social issues, but then I realized that, okay, I have a personality that I can talk about as well, that I can express. And then, yeah, it's not easy to know how to be real. Mm-hmm. It's really not easy, especially when you're put under a spotlight and people expect something out of you.
And also, when you look at like what is successful in music, it's always one thing that seems to be people being real, and then like a huge follow-on of people trying to jump on that bandwagon and like recreate it, or like, you know, like become that because they see like, oh, that's so cool, or like, and then, you know, that's also really hard to escape as well.
And a lot of people that you would think that they're being real, a lot of that, like, nobody knows what is happening behind the scenes. Nobody. You would just say, hey, yeah, this rapper or this singer or this whatever, and she just came out of nowhere and she's so cool and she's so real. But I can be, you know, writing whatever and then going backstage and I'm feeling exactly the opposite. I'm living exactly the opposite of what I'm singing about, and nobody would even know that. And that's really interesting as well, because a lot of people would just see the surface and think, okay, that's it. But they wouldn't see what is behind it.
At the same time, like, this might be like a little bit like idealistic in my head, but the things that you were talking about being in school and having to be in like a box on one hand, and on the other hand they're telling you like be yourself, on the other hand you're in a box.
Like, no.
It's like every time you get like put in a box, it's like another layer in front of yourself. You know, like, so yourself is inside somewhere, and every time you get put in a box, there's another layer in front of it. But then I think, like, for me anyway, like music and art and stuff, when you hear something or see something that's really real, it kind of like blows away the layers for other people. You know what I mean? And like, say if you could direct, you like for thinking. It
gets you closer to that, maybe. You know, like you can kind of see things that you are interested in that is like more true to you. You know. Yeah. And then you can kind of start to find the trail, but it's really hard to like define what that is.
But it's real, it's different for everyone. Like, for example, if you think totally like for like the Beatles, for example, like when they started making music, there's teenagers who are like, holy shit, this is like our voice, we never had a voice before. And then it kind of like allowed people to kind of break out of the mold in a way.
Kind of. I mean, yeah, but
it would help people. You mean it would help people to like get rid of their layers?
Yes,
and, like,
exactly.
Yeah,
Definitely. That's what I mean.
Definitely. Because for me as well, like listening to other artists and helps a lot because you see something that you never thought that this is what you really think, and then someone just like, oh shit. It's like, shit.
Can I ask a question? What were your musical influences growing up? Because I hear like a lot of different types of music in your music. It's obviously the big Arabic influence.
No, not really.
No?
Not
It's
really.
like a lot of, with the damn stuff, the sound, as the kind of like, just from a musical point of view, like you can hear the scales or like the kind of tonalities of Arabic music.
Well, Dam's, I have to say,
bit.
Dam's
To me, anyway.
music, Dam's album is something I never thought that I would do. Like, I never thought that I can rap until we did this album. I've never rapped before. This is the first time, and I never knew that I can rap. And the music is very different than what I would usually do. But I think my influences keep changing all the time. And when I was growing up, my parents would listen to a lot of classical Arabic music, but for me that wasn't cool. And my two were 4 sisters, and at that time my little sister was still not born. I had 2 older sisters, and they were listening to like American and British pop and rock and all of that. I was like, yeah, that's cool, I would listen to that. So I grew up listening a lot to like Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls and Linkin Park and all of these things. Gradually going to Nickelback and Hinder and all of these like alternative soft rock kind of thing. And only then I started discovering Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin. Amy Winehouse was like, for me, oh my god, I'm so in love with her. Amy Winehouse was a huge influence for me. First of all, because I love the way she sings. I love her techniques in singing, and I love how real she is.
Like, she's a badass.
Wow,
Such
crazy!
a badass.
Like the sentences that she would say in her music, it's like, what? How can you be so real? There's a sentence in her song that she was sleeping with another guy, but she came because she was thinking of her boyfriend. It's like, how do you put that even into a song? Like, I was thinking of you when I came, and how do you... I was like, I needed that so much, that realness, I really needed that. And then Erykah Badu, of course, Lauryn Hill. And it just keeps changing, and with time, when I joined Dam, I started listening more to hip-hop, so now I listen a lot of hip-hop. And now one of my main influences is Hiatus Coyote. Do you know them?
I love those guys.
My god, they're everything. Do you know them? Oh my god.
Australian kind of, what would you say, like kind of
It's
new,
like a
neo soul,
new jazz. That's what that's how they.
A friend of mine used to actually go out with the drummer.
Oh my god.
Really married him. Well, they're phenomenal.
Wow, they're crazy.
She's
Their album
amazing.
Choose Your Weapon is like a masterpiece.
Napalm.
I love her. She's so good. She's so... her singing is like... melts my
She's got
heart.
style for days as well.
Wow, they're so good. They're so good. I love them.
Would I be correct in saying you have a little bit of a reggae influence as well? Because I heard some tracks that had the kind of one-drop vibe there.
That's Ministry of Dubki vibe.
Okay.
So
Right.
when I started singing and doing music, I just threw myself out to everything. Like, yeah, sure, you want me to sing reggae? I'll sing reggae. And then I started singing with Ministry of Dubki, which is like dub and reggae and like world music influence, but yeah, a lot of Arabic influences into that. And then I was singing with Toot Art for a bit. I didn't record anything with them, but I was singing live for a bit, and that was also like kind of reggae world music type of thing. And then Dam happened, and I'm like, yeah, sure, I don't listen to hip hop. I mean, I grew up listening to Dam. Dam is like, I was like in 5th grade, and I'm like knowing all the lyrics with my hat on and like taking pictures like this, in the most rap poses and ever. And that's the only rap that I used
gang
to.
signs.
Yeah, definitely. That's the only hip hop that I would listen to growing up. And then Dam came, hey, do you wanna have... I actually remember one time, and I was really young, and there was a place in Haifa called the Back Door, and they used to have a lot of shows there. And that specific time, like, the rap scene was so blooming, and a lot of people were doing rap, and a lot of this and a lot of that, and I was in love with them. And I went there, and I'm watching them on stage, and I'm thinking, and I knew that I wanted to be a musician. I was thinking, will I ever be good enough for them to talk to me and tell me, let's do a song together?
You were watching them?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that. I was in the crowd, in the middle of the crowd, and they're singing, and I'm like, goosebumps everywhere, and I'm like, fuck, I want to sing with them one day. I want to sing with them one day. Will I do that? Will I do that? And now, bam, I'm the
Dream
fucking
come
album.
true.
yeah, definitely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and then Dan came to me, and they're like, yeah, you want me to rap? Sure, I'll rap. Let's do it.
Whatever you need.
When did you join the time?
I started singing with them in 2012, but only in live shows. I was not a part of the band. And then in 2015 or 16, I think 16, we released our first single together, which is called Who You Are Min Inta. And that was like the point that, okay, we're announcing I'm a part of the band, and that's when it happened.
Did you release Between City Walls in 2017?
Yes.
So like did they kind of overlap with each other? Like
I was always doing more than one thing at a time, and I was studying then as well. I studied music for 3 years, and Between City Walls was actually my graduation project. So I had last year it was something that I was working.
Is that in Haifa as well?
That was in Tel Aviv.
In Tel Aviv. Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
but I'd be really interested to like hear a little bit about the process of making that album. Like
Of the album. Oh my god. Okay. It was actually really. I'm gonna start with the name Between City Walls. When I moved to Jaffa and started studying in Tel Aviv, it was like a huge culture shock for me, because I come from Haifa, as we said, which is like a really chill place. You know, people would say that Haifa is like the place of coexistence. It's bullshit. Coexistence only coexist in hummus and falafel. But other than that, like you wouldn't really see, like you wouldn't really, like there's the Arabic neighborhoods and there's the Jewish neighborhoods, and we don't mix, and it's okay. And if you find someone, we would talk, but there's no real relationships. And then I moved to Jaffa, start studying in Tel Aviv, and I was the only Arabic person in the school that I was studying in. And between like maybe 300, 400 people, I was like the only Arabic person there. And I started making a lot of friends, and it's the first time that I really go into like, I know a lot of Israeli people and met a lot of Israeli people, but this is the first time that I'm actually so much into, you know, the gang and all of that. And then it was just, Tel Aviv is so like rushy and noisy and blah, I hate that place. But anyway, and for me it was like a lot of things, like, you know, I was studying and a year passed and I had all of my friends in school and we studied together and we go out, we have drinks, all of this, all of that. And then at the same time, and then at some point, I think it was my second year, that a war in Gaza broke out. And I don't know if you know about the military, and like every Israeli person is he has to do or she has to do in the military for 3 years, but then until they're like 40, I think, or 45, if there is anything that is happening, a war, something, I don't know, they would call every person that was in the army and bring them back for like 2 weeks with no, you know, they can call you and they tell you, okay, tomorrow you have to be in the army for 2 weeks, and there's like, doesn't matter if you have work, if you have shows, if you have travels, if you have to go to the army. And then I was, you know, second year, and I had a lot of amazing friends in school, all Israelis, and then the war in Gaza broke out, and I was Skyping with my friend from Gaza, MC Gaza, if you know him, Brahim. Yeah. And we were Skyping together, and he put his laptop on the window, and the electricity keeps cutting off, and then suddenly he would say, oh, here, and then suddenly we'd see like a boom, and like huge flames, and all the screen goes like this, and I'm awake until like 5 a.m., and I'm like, shit, like, will he make it? What will happen? What is happening? And then I go the next day to school, and like more than half of the classroom is empty because all of my friends are in the military because they have to go to the military. And I'm like Skyping at the same time. It was such a mind fuck for me.
Yeah.
And all of these experience of being there and realizing that and being the only Palestinian there and feeling like an attraction there between all the people, and because like it's so easy and everybody says we're leftists, but nobody has any idea what is going on. And for a lot of people, being leftist is like, yeah, I have Arab friends, I'm leftist, and you know, the Arab friends that they would have is because, yeah, sure, it's cool to have Arab friends, so I have Arab friends. It was like I felt so out of place all of that time when I was there, and that's where all the songs came out of, and that's why it's called Between City Walls, because I felt so stuck in this place and so out of order, out of place, and that's where the songs came from. Well, 2 of the songs I wrote before I started studying, which is Ta'alim Bikafi'at, but all of the rest is like that.
What was the process for making the album?
The process of making the album, it was it was my graduation project, and it's actually a collaboration between 3 students. So you have like the songwriter, how do you, like you
like
can
a composer?
No, you have like each person studies different things. I was majoring in like songwriting and all of that. A friend of mine was majoring in production and all of that, and another friend was majoring in sound. And we would just split into groups, and every 3 people from different that would do the project together. So this album was actually my final project and 2 other people's final projects who studied with me.
There's like some of the titles on the on Spotify. The titles are in English, some of them, but like the singings it's in Arabic.
It's
so
in Arabic,
is there like, is it I don't know, just listening to you talk, I'm trying to figure out like where the art and the politics, where they cross over and where they divide, and like listening to the album, it's obviously hard to say what the songs are about. So is there like I don't know, when I listen to an album, it's like going to the movies. When you can understand the lyrics, it's different because you can have a picture in your head, and like it brings you on a journey. What's the journey of that album?
What's the journey of the album?
Is it like, what's the message of it like? Is there a way to...
I wouldn't know how to tell you, actually, because I was so confused when I was writing the album. I was really confused, and you can feel that mainly in a song called Majnoon, Crazy. And I was just so confused. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I feel. I didn't know what I think. I didn't know what I stand for. I didn't know, because everything was new for me. Everything was new, and everything was so confusing. And the journey of that was just this, I cannot tell you that this album, like I can definitely tell you Dam's album changed my life, definitely. My album, it helped me go through and realize a lot of the confusions and where it's coming from, but it was like, I need to let it out. I'm letting it out, and okay, I finished the album, and I was still very confused, but it was like, I was able to talk a little bit.
So it was like an outlet for how you were feeling about your life at the time, more of a reflection as opposed to
and if you listen,
story.
Yes, and if you listen to the songs, each song is different. One song is like with acoustics and cajon, and one song is like more electronic, and it's pretty much. I was like
that's
all
kind of
over.
Why I asked you the question, because we were listening to it this morning, it was like that. And when you're talking about it, you ever like have lots of stuff in your head and you just get like a notebook and you're just like,
and you just let it out,
and
no logic.
So good after
Therapy.
Like Majnoon, specifically Majnoon, if you read the lyrics, if I don't tell you what, like a lot of people were asking me like, were you on drugs when you wrote that song? And I was like, no, but I was living in Tel Aviv and confused as fuck, so this is what I wrote, like it's similar to doing drugs, I guess. But yeah, it's a very confused album for me. I love it because I love the feeling, and because I know like how much I went through since that album. And the album was actually finished in 2015, and it took me 2 years to be able to release that, because I had to do everything alone, no management, no booking, no blah 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 blah. So I did everything alone, with raising money for it, for like the printing and the mastering and all of that. And it took me 2 years after I finished it. But definitely the feeling of like unsureness that you have when you listen to the album, I imagine that people a little bit feel that, because the songs are so different. That's pretty much how I was feling.
That's interesting, like to pick that up, even though like I said,
no lyrical context at all.
What was I going to ask you there was so this is a kind of, I guess, like a kind of big question. I don't know even if it's possible to discuss it in this way, but before we came here I was just watching some documentaries about the music scene in Palestine, and I guess it kind of went to some of the kind of Israeli cities as well. You know, the thing that you talked about, the art and politics and like how they cross over sometimes. I mean, so with the big picture, what do you think the scene is like? Is art being used in a way that like to try and legitimize what's happening in Palestine by the Israelis as well in some respects? Like when I was listening to some of the
Israeli music,
Israeli hip hop, like it's like a propaganda tool.
Yeah, definitely.
So how, and then you know, like I'm trying to think back to, for example, in Belfast in the 60s and the 70s, there was a war going on. The communities were like separated. People were dying all the time, and my dad would have been like really into music at the time, and the punks and stuff like that kind of came together and were like, not to say that they didn't have political ideas in their head, but it kind of like it was kind of like a middle point where they had a common ground. But then when I was reading up and watching documentaries about hip hop in Palestine and Israel, I was like, how can Palestinian hip hop artists come together with the Israeli ones when the politics have become so ingrained in music?
Yeah, I know what you. Well, first of all, a lot of things, like most of the things that we write about, like most of the Palestinian artists, even though the songs could be very personal, a lot of times they come out of a political place without, maybe it's not even noticeable in the songs. But for me, like Ta'al, one of the first songs that I wrote, is a love song. It's a true story. I was in love with this dude from Bethlehem, and I was living in Haifa, and you had the separation wall. And for me, it was not a sad song. It's just, let's get together and just fly to Mars. Let's just dream, because I heard if you dream and you believe in your dream, then it might come true. So let's just dream. Let's go to Mars. We'll take the guitar in water, and so it's like a very dreamy song, but it's very political, because the reason that I wrote this song is I was so tired of, he can't come visit me, I have to go visit him, he can't cross the border, he can't come to Haifa, he can't go anywhere. So, it was this, and most songs that come from Palestinians and Israeli, they're very politically driven, very much. And a lot of people which are like really rightist people, you would find a lot of like very racist music as well. But then the thing is that we have endless messages that from Israeli people, Israeli musicians, asking us to do songs together. But the main problem is when they're asking a Palestinian musician to perform with them or do a song with them, it doesn't matter who the person is, it's because it's Palestinian, and the song would always be about, hey, I really want to do a song about peace. Let's just sing about peace. Forget everything else. And I'm like, motherfucker, you're living in Tel Aviv in like the highest building and like the most beautiful life. You don't give a fuck about going to Lebanon or to this or to that. You have no idea what is going on in Gaza. You have no idea what is going on in the West Bank. You want to sing with me? Sure, let's do a song together, but I'm going to talk about these things, and fuck your peace. Let's talk about this, and then we talk about peace, because peace is not possible when you just want to ignore everything. And it's that, and it's rating, and it's getting views, and it's getting that, because again, being friends with Palestinians and doing a song with the Palestinians, wow, it's like the coolest thing ever. It's so authentic, and it's so authentic to talk about peace, because the Palestinian living inside of Israel that do music with it, they're more like the Israelis. They would say like, they're more like us, they can talk about peace. It's like, that's why it doesn't happen, because not once I received a message from an Israeli musician telling me, let's talk about truth. It's always like, no, let's just forget about it. We're not political people, right? And it's true, because I wouldn't mind sitting with an Israeli person. We would sit for hours, we would talk, we would this, we would that, but just please don't talk to me about peace when you like, because it's so,
Well, they're participating in the occupation, where they're like,
it's not like participating, but you can't ignore everything that Palestinians are going through and tell me you want to talk about peace. You don't want to talk about peace. You want to sell your music because peace is a trend right now, and doing music with Palestinians is a trend, even though they don't realize it. Because like people would be like, no, really, we want to talk about peace. I'm like, okay, you want to talk about peace? You want to do something about peace? Let's do something about together. Come with me to a demonstration. We go to the West Bank. Let's go see Ramallah, and let's go through Qalandia, and then tell me you want to talk about peace. Let's do it then, after that, and that's mainly why I don't participate in any of these things. Like, I'm not going to be a trend of some sort, It's
the thing I have in my head when you're saying that is that quote, like, that neutrality in cases of injustice is like the same as taking the side of the aggressor. Like, one thing actually that I was thinking of when you were saying that is something that we've kind of talked about a little bit, because where we're staying at the minute, we're spending a lot of time in the Aida refugee camp, and we're staying just outside it, beside the checkpoints. We walk along the wall, and like every day there's people jumping off the buses to come and see the wall. They stop at the wall, and like I kind of have mixed feelings about the people that write on the wall, because some people jump off the bus, take a picture, write up, like, peace and love,
free Palestine,
of course,
and then like
put it all over Instagram and look, man, I'm doing something.
Yeah, but I wouldn't. I don't mind that, because I don't expect people to be so involved in the Palestinian struggle if they're not Palestinian or if they're not Israeli. Like, I'm gonna talk about me personally, okay? I know about what is going on in Syria, I know what is going on in other places in the world, but I'm not so engaged in it, so I wouldn't expect anybody else to be so engaged. And I would understand, writing peace and free Palestine on the wall and then leaving. You know what? Okay, but just don't try to ignore everything and release a picture of everything is good, because not everything is really not good. And you know what, this is what you want to do and you want to post about it, sure, like, it doesn't mean a thing, and do whatever you want, but don't come and take me to your picture of how you imagine it, of how you want it to be, ignoring whatever I went through and all the Palestinians went through, because you want to talk about peace but you don't want to talk about what is going on, because talking about what is going on is not, we don't want that, we just want the happy picture. That's my problem. When you wanna come and put your fucking white privileged point of view on my life and then take it to wherever you want and do the picture that you want. Because really they would choose like any Palestinian person. It wouldn't matter as long as they're Palestinian.
You know what you were saying about the song about being in love with someone from Bethlehem? Like, I remember, it's funny, like, how I ended up coming over here in the first place a couple of years ago was because we always had a very strong sense of solidarity with what's happening in Palestine, in Ireland and in Belfast in particular. I remember, like, I was about 14 or 15 looking out of my bedroom window, and there's a wall in Belfast also, just thinking, fuck, like, and it's like teenage no boy me, like, living like half the girls in this city are like over there, and I'm never going to be able to see them.
It's fucked, and it's so crazy. This world is such a crazy, surreal place,
Yeah, it's hard to come into. Like, I was saying to Anna on the bus earlier, it's like, I was like, do you ever experience like cognitive dissonance here? Because like I feel confused. I can't like wrap my head, or like my head feels like it's gonna break sometimes here. I'm like, I just can't. I can't. It literally feels like my brain is like gonna move. Like one hemisphere is gonna move forward, and the other just like try and find a new pathway to try and understand what the fuck is going on. Because it's just so far removed from my reality, and like we talked a lot about this on this trip, about like feeling guilty or feeling like overprivileged, and like, like just witnessing the fact that people don't have even the freedom of movement in their own country, and it's like you have this kind of like white man guilt almost just coming in and being like, am I being too much of a tourist, and like, am I just like at the zoo, like kind of But then we kind of have arrived at the conclusion.
That you have even these thoughts, because.
But we also have arrived at the conclusion that like it makes no sense to dwell in the guilt of being that, you know, in relation to what is happening here, because that doubles down on the negativity of it all. And like what we do have is the privilege to be able to like tell these stories and like expose it, you know, to the rest of the world who aren't listening or like who aren't.
But that's exactly
even close
this.
to like trying to understand it or don't even want to understand it, because they're like, let them do it themselves, you know, let them just sort it out between themselves, which isn't ever going to really happen, probably, you know. So yeah, it's a bit of a dichotomy, but you have to be aware of it.
Definitely. But it's so amazing that there are people that are aware of that, you know, because like a lot of people would just come, like there's countless European people and like whatever that coming here, you know, with their like tourist things, and all these kids running around barefoot in the refugee camp. This looks so sweet. Let's just film that and put that. Now, you know, this just putting out, you know, I came here, I'm the savior, I'm the white savior that is coming here to solve all the problems and do this and do that. And most of these people do not have that thought that you have, because most people would still turn whatever is happening in Palestine to them. I'm the one that came here to help. I'm the savior. I'm going to be the one that's going to film these things and put it out to the rest of the world in my point of view, not talking about the feelings of the people, not talking about. But for me, if people, I really rather people not come here and not film at all if this is the attitude that they're taking and this is the picture that they want to put. Because, you know, you feel that, I feel that whenever one of these people come and talk to me about this thing, because it wouldn't like be talking, you would always feel that they feel a little bit of like they feel bad for you, so they would come to you and like, hi, how you doing? And I'm like, talk to me normally, and don't talk to me in pity, and you know, talk to me regularly. Khalas, let's just, you know, get rid of that. And it's amazing for me to see people that are actually aware of that, because I'm so sick of it, you know, and everybody's so sick of it. And you would ask like a lot of people, a lot of Palestinian people, like, what do you think about these white movies that is going on in Palestine? And I would tell you 90% of the people would say, don't come here, don't film. You know, unless you want to be, it's not help. It's really not helping. It's just making it a trend. It's the same thing as going in Africa, you know? Exactly, going in Africa. It's such a hip thing to go to Africa and volunteer there and take a selfie with the black kids and post it on Instagram because I'm this and I'm that. And it's so tiring, and people don't realize that this is not helping. This is such a selfish thing to do.
That's like the context of our trip here was always to, like, I think maybe started from whenever I was in school when people were coming to Belfast to visit, and it was never a case of, there are things that are for like the school that we went to, the cultural centre, the theatre, the restaurant, all those things that started in the 80s and the 90s that are there today because the people, like, we started them ourselves, and my parents' generation and the generation before that started things for themselves, and we're never looking for like help. Not like they weren't like, come help us, so we're so bad, everything's bad here.
It was never out of desperation.
It was never like that kind of, nobody ever wanted charity, but at the same time when we were in school and there was people from Palestine or there was people from South Africa or the Basque Country were coming into our classrooms, we were talking about this last night, when I became older, the importance of that for me was that they came just to be there and so to hear what was going on and to like say like, we're standing with you guys, and then go off and like tell other people about it. It wasn't like, oh, look at the poor little kids on the Falls Road, you know, like they're so bad, such a bad situation. It wasn't like that, because, and I think that's the value kind of in a way.
Well, when you've got like an oppressive force telling you you're not valid, and then like to have those people come in and validate,
or,
like,
your parents always tell you you're good. They're always like, with the kids, you guys are so good, blah blah blah. But when someone comes from the outside and just like, it's just an extra little thing that you just like, shit.
It's reinforcement.
And a lot of times, like, the thing is, like, a lot of times, and most of the people come for this one time and, you know, do this post and do this thing and look at us like, oh, look at the poor people, we're gonna post about it, and then whoosh, khalas, disappear. They did it once, they did this thing. And yeah, it's only about the attitude that people come with. If they're coming to learn, or if they're coming with the, you know, the savior point of view of like, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna help these poor people. Like, no, don't come help us. Please don't come help us. Like, don't come. You wanna come learn? Ahla wa sahla. You know, Arab hospitality would open the big table, drink as much as you want, eat as much as you want, but don't come save us. Come learn. And then, for sure, yeah, come listen. Sure, you're more than welcome. We talk about this a lot, actually, in Dam's album, about this thing.
What was just the next question?
We talk a lot about this in Dam's album. We talk about self-love, about doing this thing, breaking the egg from the inside and blooming, and not someone from the outside coming to break an egg from the outside and kill whatever life there is inside. You, like, if you want to, that's a good analogy. That's if you want to do it, and if you want to fix it, so let's break the egg from the inside. Let's get life. And the whole attitude of the album, the whole attitude of the way that we used to write, or that Dam used to write music, until today, it changed a lot, because the attitude of the album Ben Hana Mana is not of like, we're so angry, we're so sad and we don't know what to do. No, like, the attitude is like, okay, we are in darkness now, but it's not a darkness of a tomb, it's a darkness of a womb, and we're going to be reborn after this. And that's the whole attitude of the album. Let's do it, forget about the rest of the world. There's songs like Prozac, just saying, I don't want your Prozac, I don't want your analogies, go deal with your depression alone. Let us be depressed, we're gonna deal with it alone. We don't want any Western intervention into our life and trying to fix it. And then there's songs like Miljardat, where we're actually talking about, you know, Arab leadership and how fucked is that, and how billions of dollars are put to separate us. But then Dam released, like, was that in 2001, I think Dam released the song Min Irhabi, and it was like, you know, way before YouTube, way before all of that, and in a very short time it was downloaded more than like 2 million times or something like that, and people still know it until today, and it's 20 years later and people still ask for that songs in the shows. And so that's, the song is like, billions of dollars are spent from leadership to break us apart, but then Min Irhabi cost us nothing, literally nothing, but people sing it in Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Haifa, in Ramallah, in all of these places. So let's focus on that, so how to love yourself, how to treat yourself, how to know who you are, how to know how to be alone, how to know how to love your community, and all of that, and how to know how to, there's a saying in Arabic, I don't know if it exists in any language, but don't put your dirty laundry out. Do you use that? Yeah. So in this song specifically, we're like, take all the laundry out, just put it, clean your house, let's do like a huge spring clean, let's clean everything, let's make it shiny, and yalla, but we do it without the
on your own terms.
And that's the whole, you know, point of view, or like attitude of the album, of like, we're sick of it and we're gonna do it alone, you know. Khalas. Let's love ourselves, let's respect ourselves, and let's do it.
One thing I wanted to ask you about was, what's it like being a female artist in Palestine?
It's really interesting. I never realized that there's a difference between being a female musician and a male musician until we released Min Inta dance songs, because the messages that I would receive are very different than the messages that the guys received. Good and bad, we had a lot of amazing feedbacks in, but it's the ones that I received is very different. And then I started, you know, understanding more what it is to be a female musician, and I can say that I'm so grateful that I'm a woman Palestinian musician, because it puts you, I don't know, it's really funny, because it's really hard being a Palestinian woman, but at the same time I feel so privileged that I'm a Palestinian woman and a Palestinian musician, because it I feel that it puts me into a place that I can understand what it means to be oppressed, also politically, and also because I'm a woman, and also because of this. And I know how it feels to be portrayed as, it doesn't matter who you are, just come and be the Palestinian singer. I was invited to the United States once for a show, and when I got there, I was like the headline of the show. And when I got there, I realized that people that invited me had no idea who I am. No idea whatsoever. They did not know my album. They did not know that I have an album out. They did not know anything. It was like a Palestinian sort of thing. And I'm a Palestinian musician, and I'm the only, probably one of the few Palestinian musicians that can travel. And hey, we have a woman Palestinian musician. Let's put her in the line, in the line. And that was like something that was very hard for me for a long time, because there's a song in Dam's album, it's called حقيقي كفاية. I'm real enough to admit that I'm not always real enough, and we talk about these things a lot. And one of the lines that I say is, am I a geographical talent? Because whenever there's a war going on in Gaza, I go onto a European tour, even though I'm not from Gaza. But whenever there is a war in Syria, I'm put on the shelf, and someone from Syria is taking to do the European tour. And it's like that a lot of times. And I think being a woman musician and feeling that and living that, not only hearing about it, living that and knowing how different it is, from the simplest thing, from the simplest feedbacks from people that love our music. But you would see that they would tell Tamer or Mahmoud, you are amazing, you are kings, and they would come to me and go, you're so cute. Dude, these small things, because like even the respect that people get from, like, the respect that people have for women and for men is very different, obviously. Yeah. And I think I'm very privileged to do that, because at the same time it stops me from doing a lot of things, and at the same time, you know what, my image sells. I'm a Palestinian woman, and I sing, and I go on stage, and I dance on stage. You want to take that? Yalla, put me on your line check. You don't have to know who I am, but I'm gonna come to the stage and I'm gonna talk, and I'm gonna talk about everything, and I'm gonna tell you know what, fuck it, yalla, take me. And I'm in a band, actually. I have 3 bands right now, which is Dam, my own solo project, and another band. It's called Kallimi. We're pretty new, and Kallimi is a collaboration between Palestinian female artists and Swiss female. We're actually 2 Palestinian, 1 Swiss, and 1 Dominican Republic, 4 women on stage. And we've been working for a year. We still don't have anything put out. We have only like a 2 minutes promo video with like snippets of 3 songs in the video. We already toured Canada, we toured Palestine, we had like 4 or 5 times in Switzerland, we have Paris in May, we might have Korea in June. We're like traveling the world, and nobody knows our music. But you know what, we're 4 women, 2 Palestinian, 1 Dominican, and 1 Swiss, half Palestinian, and that sells. Come on, I tell you, we're like 4 women, 1 Dominican, 1 Swiss, and 2 Palestinians. Wouldn't you want to come and listen to that? So you know what, my image sells. Yalla, let's do it. Come, and we're gonna fucking take over you with the magic of our music. For yalla, just, it's just switching between I don't want to be that image, and I don't want to be only put under that too. You know what, do whatever you want. I'm gonna come and crush it.
In Palestine, like, that thing with men and women is like, I guess it's in most countries in the world, but is it is more extreme in Palestine with the
being a woman or
being, like, say, a female artist in a country where, like, it's not to say that like Ireland isn't like not an equal country either.
It seems to be like, but more opposite in
from your experience of say performing in say other countries in Europe compared to Palestine and how it's received. Is it?
I think. If I understand your question correctly, I think that the way it's shown is different, but the core is the same. Because here they might not allow me to go on stage, and we once had a show stopped the moment I stepped on stage.
Why?
Because I'm a woman, and there were 2 other men on the stage, which is interesting because we were in this show in this village, and before me there were 2 other guys, Arab guys, and a woman from Spain singing with them, and nobody said anything. And then they went off stage, and I got on stage with the 2 other guys, but I'm Palestinian and I cannot be on stage with 2 other guys, so no, they stopped the show. And that doesn't happen. That rarely happens. It really rarely happens. But the thing is, here maybe when I'm in Ramallah, like I cannot wear whatever I want or whatever, this kind of bullshit, and the respect is different. But whenever I'm in the West, I'm overly sexualized. I'm overly put under this image of, you know what, I'm always, men is like, no, like, the main problem is also that a lot of men that would call themselves feminists, or would call themselves whatever they want to call themselves, or, you know, see themselves as liberal and free and non-sexist. And a lot of these people would say, no, but don't put your hijab, like, you need to be free. And I'm like, putting hijab does not mean you're not free, you know? And wearing shorts does not mean you're free. And free means doing whatever the fuck you want without you come and tell me, like, no, don't wear the hijab, you should be free, so strip off your clothes. Like, no, I want to be in a hijab, you know? And that's something that is always, you know, the attitude is different, but the core is the same. There's always difference in the way people treat men and then the way they treat women. And you feel that everywhere in different aspects, but it's there. And I wouldn't say that there's a place that is more extreme than the other. Just that the tactics used is different. Yeah.
That was the question, actually.
Perfect. I'm happy.
All right. So, what are you doing next? Like, with music and stuff?
With music, I'm currently going back to writing my own songs. Finally, I haven't written a song in more than 3 years because of all the reasons that I was talking and being so confused and don't know how to portray and how to do this and how to do that. So now I'm working on my own stuff to hopefully release some stuff in a few upcoming months, and just keep on doing what I do. I never really plan. I just do it, and I don't have really a clear plan, but let's see. The most amazing things happen without planning. So I'm flowing, but definitely going to be making more music all the time.
Thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
That was an amazing conversation.
Oh, cool. I'm happy.
Really insightful.
This chapter of Roald Dahl's book, Boy Tales of Childhood, is called Getting Dressed for the Big School. And if you want to go back to the very beginning of the book, then go back to episode 51 of the podcast and you'll find the first chapter at the end of that episode. Anyway, here we go. Getting Dressed for the Big School. When I was 12, my mother said to me, "I've entered you for Marlborough and Repton. Which would you like to go to?" Both were famous public schools, but that was all I knew about them. Repton, I said. I'll go to Repton. It was an easier word to say than Marlborough. Very well, my mother said. You shall go to Repton. We were living in Kent then, in a place called Bexley. Repton was up in the Midlands near Derby, and some 140 miles away to the north. That was of no consequence. There was plenty of trains. Nobody was taken to school by car in those days. We were put on the train. I was exactly 13 in September 1929 when the time came for me to go to Repton. On the day of my departure, I had first of all to get dressed for the part. I had been to London with my mother the week before to buy the school clothes, and I remember how shocked I was when I saw the outfit I was expected to wear. "I can't possibly go about in those," I cried. "Nobody wears things like that." "Are you sure you haven't made a mistake?" my mother said to the shop assistant. "If he's going to Repton, madam, he must wear these clothes," the assistant said firmly. And now this amazing fancy dress was all laid out on my bed, waiting to be put on. "Put it on," my mother said. "Hurry up, or you'll miss the train." "I'll look like a complete idiot," I said. My mother went out of the room and left me to it. With immense reluctance, I began to dress myself. First, there was a white shirt with a detachable white collar. The collar was unlike any other collar I had seen. It was as stiff as a piece of perspex. At the front, the stiff points of the collar were bent over to make a pair of wings, and the whole thing was so tall that the points of the wings, as I discovered later, rubbed against the underneath of my chin. It was known as a butterfly collar. To attach the butterfly collar to the shirt, you needed a black stud and a back stud and a front stud. I'd never been through this rigmarole before. I must do this properly, I told myself. So first, I put the back stud in the back of the collar band of the shirt. Then I tried to attach the back of the collar to the back stud, but the collar was so stiff I couldn't get the stud through the slit. I decided to soften it with spit. I put the edge of the collar into my mouth and sucked the starch away. It worked. The stud went through the slit and the back of the collar was now attached to the back of the shirt. I inserted the front stud into one side of the front of the shirt and slipped the shirt over my head. With the help of a mirror, I now set upon pushing the top of the front stud through the first of the two slits in the front of the collar. It wouldn't go. The slit was so small and stiff and starchy that nothing would go through it. I took the shirt off and put both the front slits of the collar into my mouth and chewed them until they were soft. The starch didn't taste of anything. I put the shirt back on, and at last I was able to get the front stud through the collar slits. Around the collar, but underneath the butterfly wings, I tied a black tie, using an ordinary tie knot. Then came the trousers and the braces. The trousers were black, with thin pinstriped grey lines running down them. I buttoned the braces onto the trousers, 6 buttons in all. Then I put on the trousers and adjusted the braces to the correct length by sliding 2 brass clips up and down. I put on a brand new pair of black shoes and laced them up. Now for the waistcoat. This was also black, and it had 12 buttons down the front and 2 little waistcoat pockets on either side, one above the other. I put it on and did up the buttons, starting at the top and working down. I was glad I didn't have to chew each of those buttonholes to get the buttons through them. All this was bad enough for a boy who'd never worn anything more elaborate than a pair of shorts and a blazer, but the jacket put the lid on it. It wasn't actually a jacket, it was a sort of a tailcoat. And it was without a doubt the most ridiculous garment I had ever seen. Like the waistcoat, it was jet black and made of heavy serge-like material. In the front, it was cut away so that the two sides only met at one point, about halfway down the waistcoat. Here there was a single button, and this had to be done up. From the button downwards, the lines of the coat separated and curved away behind the legs of the wearer and came together again at the backs of the knees, forming a pair of tails. The tails were separated by a slit, and when you walked about they flapped against your legs. I put the thing on and did up the front button. Feeling like an undertaker's apprentice in a funeral parlour, I crept downstairs. My sisters shrieked with laughter when I appeared. "He can't go out in those," they cried. "He'll be arrested by the police." "Put your hat on," my mother said, handing me a stiff, wide-brimmed straw hat with a blue and black band around it. I put it on and did my best to look dignified. The sisters fell all over the room laughing. My mother got me out of the house before I lost my nerve completely, and together we walked through the village to Bexley station. My mother was going to accompany me to London and see me on to the Derby train, but she'd been told that on no account should she travel further than that. I had only a small suitcase to carry. My trunk had been sent on ahead, labelled "luggage in advance." "Nobody's taking the slightest notice of you," my mother said as we walked through Bexley High Street, and curiously enough, nobody was. "I've learnt one thing about England," my mother went on. "It's a country where men love to wear uniforms and eccentric clothes. 200 years ago, their clothes were even more eccentric than they are today. You can consider yourself lucky you didn't have to wear a wig on your head and ruffles on your sleeves." "I still feel an ass," I said. "Everyone who looks at you," my mother said, "knows that you're going away to public school. All English public schools have their own different crazy uniforms. People will be thinking how lucky you are to be going to one of those famous places." We took the train from Bexley to Charing Cross and then went by taxi to Euston Station. At Euston, I was put on the train for Derby with lots of other boys who all wore the same ridiculous clothes as me, and away I went. Bozers. At Repton, prefects were never called prefects. They were called bozers. and they had the power of life and death over us junior boys. They could summon us down in our pyjamas at night time and thrash us for leaving just one football sock on the floor of the changing room when it should have been hung up on a peg. A bozer could thrash us for 101 other piddling little misdemeanours. For burning his toast at tea time, for failing to dust his study properly, for failing to get his study fire burning in spite of spending half your pocket money on firelighters, for being late at roll call, for taking in evening prep, for forgetting to change into house shoes at 6 o'clock. The list was endless. 4 with the dressing gown on, or 3 with it off, the bozers would say to you in the changing room late at night. Others in the dormitory had told you what to answer to this question. 4 with it on, you mumbled, trembling. This bozer was famous for the speed of his strokes. Most of them paused between each stroke to prolong the operation, but Williamson, the great footballer, cricketer and athlete, always delivered his strokes in a series of swift back and forth movements without any pause between them at all. 4 strokes would rain down upon your bottom so fast it was all over in 4 seconds. A ritual took place in the dormitory after each beating. The victim was required to stand in the middle of the room and lower his pyjama trousers so that the damage could be inspected. Half a dozen experts would crowd around you and express their opinions in highly professional language. What a super job. He's got every single one in the same place. Crikey. No one could tell you had more than one, except for the mess. Boy, that Williamson's got a terrific eye. Of course he had a terrific eye. Why do you think he's a cricket teamer? There's no wet blood though. If you had just one more, he'd have got some blood out. Through a dressing gown too. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Most bozers couldn't get a result like that without a dressing gown. You must have tremendously thin skin. Even Williamson couldn't have done that to ordinary skin. Did he use the long one or the short one? Hang on, don't pull them up yet. I've got to see this again. And I would stand there, slightly bemused by this cool clinical approach. Once, I was still standing in the middle of the dormitory with my pyjama trousers around my knees when Williamson came through the door. What on earth do you think you're doing? He said, knowing very well exactly what I was doing. Nothing, I stammered, nothing at all. Pull those pyjamas up and get into bed immediately, he ordered. But I noticed that as he turned away to go out of the door, he craned his head over so slightly to one side to catch a glimpse of my bare bottom and his own handiwork. I was certain I detected a little glimmer of pride around the edges of his mouth before he closed the door behind him.